Early August 1944. Dawn breaks over Granville, France. The palace that once housed French royalty now serves as supreme headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Its ornate halls echo with bootfalls and urgent voices. Maps cover walls where paintings once hung. The scent of cigarette smoke and coffee mingles with the salt air from the nearby coast. In the operations room, a liaison officer bursts through the double doors. He carries a leather case under one arm, overnight position reports from the front. Senior staff officers look up from their morning briefings. The liaison's face is pale. Something is wrong. He spreads a large-scale map across the central table. Officers gather around. Cigarettes pause halfway to lips. Coffee cups lower slowly. The liaison begins placing markers based on the radio intercepts and scout reports. Third Army positions, one marker, then another, then another. The markers march across the map, each one further east than the last, further than anyone expected, further than anyone thought possible. A colonel leans forward, squinting. He traces the route with his finger, counting distances in his head. His finger stops. He looks up at the liaison officer. These coordinates can't be right. The liaison officer pulls out the original reports. His hands shake slightly as he unfolds the papers. "Sir, I've checked them 3 times. Another officer joins them, studying the map. He measures distances with a ruler, cross-references with the operational timeline. His face goes slack. Third Army is 60 miles beyond projected positions. Silence fills the room. The kind of silence that comes when trained military minds encounter something that violates every principle they know. Armies don't move this fast. Not American armies. Not any armies. Not since the Germans tore through France in 1940. Check the coordinates again. They check. They verify. They cross-reference with aerial reconnaissance, with radio intercepts, with reports from adjacent units. Every source confirms the same impossible truth. Third Army isn't where it's supposed to be. It's not even close. The operations room fills with voices, theories proposed and dismissed. Someone suggests the Germans are jamming communications, feeding false positions. Someone else points out that's impossible. The reports come from too many independent sources. The debate intensifies. Then the doors open again. General Dwight David Eisenhower enters the operations room, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. The man responsible for coordinating armies from 3 nations, managing egos from a dozen generals, and somehow winning this war without fracturing the alliance. He's 54 years old. The weight of command shows in the lines around his eyes, the grey threading through his hair. He carries himself with the careful control of a man who cannot afford to show doubt. Not here. Not now. The room falls silent. Officers step back from the map table. Eisenhower approaches slowly, reading the room's tension before he reads the map. He studies the markers. His eyes track the advance from the Cobra starting point near Saint-Lô, following the route east and north. The markers tell a story of movement so rapid it seems to violate the laws of logistics and military doctrine. His finger traces the route. It stops at the Mayenne River, over 100 miles from where Operation Cobra began just days ago. Several markers cluster around the river crossings that weren't supposed to happen for weeks, crossings that weren't even on the current objective list. Eisenhower stands perfectly still for a long moment. His face reveals nothing. The officers around him wait. Some have served with him long enough to recognize this stillness. It's the moment when Eisenhower's strategic mind processes information, calculates implications, weighs options. He speaks quietly. So quietly that officers lean forward to hear. "You crossed without telling us." It's not a question, though it sounds like one. It's a realization, a statement, an acknowledgement of something Eisenhower already suspected, but now must confront. George Patton has done it again. The room remains silent. No one speaks. What can they say? The evidence is on the map. Third Army has advanced further in 1 week than other Allied units have advanced in 2 months. They've crossed rivers without permission. They've captured objectives that weren't objectives yet. They've moved so fast that headquarters literally cannot track them. Eisenhower continues studying the map. The other officers watch him, waiting for fury, waiting for orders to rein Patton in, to restore order, to enforce the careful coordination that allows Allied armies to function. But Eisenhower's face shows something else. Not fury, calculation. He sees what everyone else sees, a massive violation of protocol, a commander operating beyond control. But he also sees something more, an opportunity, a breakthrough, a chance. He straightens, takes a breath. The map tells a story headquarters wasn't ready to read, a story that began 8 weeks earlier, when one general was forbidden to fight and could not stop pacing like a caged animal, waiting for his moment. 8 weeks earlier, June 1944. The dream of D-Day is dying in the hedgerows of Normandy. The invasion succeeded, barely. On June 6th, Allied forces stormed 5 beaches along the Normandy coast. Men died by the thousands in the surf, on the sand, in the cliffs above. But they held. They pushed inland. They secured a foothold in Hitler's fortress Europe. Then everything stopped. The planners had drawn neat arrows on maps, showing rapid breakouts from the beaches. Capture Cherbourg within days. Take Caen on D-Day itself. Race across France, liberate Paris, push into Germany before winter. Clean lines, clear objectives, victory by Christmas, maybe sooner. Reality is different. Reality is the bocage. The bocage is hedgerow country, ancient agricultural land crisscrossed by thick walls of earth and roots, topped with dense vegetation. Some of these hedgerows have stood for centuries, marking property boundaries, protecting fields from wind. Each hedgerow is 10 feet thick at the base, 6 feet high, impenetrable. The fields between the hedgerows average 100 yards across. Small, confined, perfect for defense. The Germans recognized this immediately. They transformed the bocage into a fortress without walls. Every hedgerow conceals machine gun nests. Every lane becomes a killing zone. Artillery observers hide in church steeples and tree lines, calling down fire on any American advance. Mortar teams register every intersection, every crossroad, every gap in the hedges. American forces push forward and die. They advance 200 yards and lose 30 men. They capture one field and face another identical field beyond it, and another, and another. The bocage stretches for miles in every direction. Hundreds of these natural fortresses, thousands of fields where men can die. British and Canadian forces fare no better. They fight for Caen, a city they were supposed to take on D-Day, a city that sits just a few miles inland from the beaches. They fight for it through June, through July, street by street, house by house. The casualties mount, the city remains contested. By late July, the Allied position in Normandy has become a nightmare. 8 weeks since D-Day, and the armies have advanced barely 30 miles inland. Some sectors measure progress in hundreds of yards. The beachhead is secure but crowded. Supplies pile up faster than they can be distributed. Men and equipment compress into a space far too small for the forces being landed daily. The casualties are horrific, not the dramatic losses of D-Day, but the grinding attrition of positional warfare. 200 men killed today, 300 wounded tomorrow, day after day after day. The same kind of mathematics that bled Europe white in the First World War. Some planners begin to worry, quietly, carefully. They don't speak it aloud, but the fear is there. What if this is as far as they get? What if the Germans can hold indefinitely? What if Normandy becomes another Anzio, another stalemate, another case of too little gained for too much blood? The maps in the operations rooms tell the story. The front lines, marked in red pencil, barely move from day to day. Adjustments measured in yards, local successes that lead nowhere. The neat arrows of the invasion plan mock them from the walls. This is the situation on July 6, 1944, when George Smith Patton Jr. arrives in France. He is 58 years old for a combat commander. Most division commanders are in their 40s, corps commanders in their early 50s. But Patton is different. He's always been different. He steps off the landing craft at Utah Beach wearing cavalry boots polished to a mirror shine, twin revolvers on his hips, one ivory-handled, one pearl-handled, and an expression that combines impatience with contempt. The beach is organized chaos. Supply dumps, vehicle parks, soldiers moving with the purposeful urgency of men under indirect fire. Patton ignores all of it. He's been here before. Not this beach, but this situation. He fought in France in the First World War, led tanks in combat before most of these young officers were born, learned lessons about movement and aggression and the cost of hesitation. His aide briefs him on the situation as they drive inland. The bocage fighting, the slow progress, the mounting casualties. Patton listens in silence, his jaw tightening with each detail. When the aide finishes, Patton stares out at the hedgerows passing by. "How long have we been stuck here?" "A month, sir, since D-Day." "A month," Patton repeats it like a curse. "In 1940, the Germans crossed France in 6 weeks. We can't move 30 miles in 4. The aide says nothing. What is there to say? The facts speak for themselves. But Patton isn't here to fight yet. His Third Army is in France, but it's not activated. The units are assembling, organizing, preparing. But they're not operational, not officially. Patton is here to watch, to wait, to prepare for a role that hasn't been defined yet. It's torture for a man like him. Patton's philosophy of war is simple, brutally simple. Some would say simplistic. But Patton has tested it in combat and found it true. War is simple. Find the enemy, kill the enemy, move fast. Everything else is commentary. He studied military history the way priests study scripture. He can quote Alexander the Great's campaigns from memory. He knows how Hannibal moved through the Alps, how Napoleon achieved his greatest victories, how the German blitzkrieg worked in 1940. The lesson is always the same. Bold, rapid movement defeats careful, methodical planning. The textbooks teach coordination, careful preparation, minimizing risk. Patton learned something different. He learned that perfect preparation is impossible. There will always be one more detail to check, one more contingency to plan for, one more risk to mitigate. And while commanders plan and prepare and coordinate, men die, slowly, steadily. The grinding mathematics of defensive warfare. Every hour spent planning is an hour the enemy spends preparing. This philosophy makes Patton difficult. His staff officers age prematurely trying to keep up with him. He issues orders and changes them an hour later when the situation shifts. He demands the impossible, then somehow his units achieve it. He operates on instinct and aggression in a war that's supposed to be run by logistics and careful planning. To conventional military minds, Patton is reckless. To Patton, conventional military minds are why wars drag on for years when they could be won in months. For 6 weeks, Patton watches other commanders fight. He visits the front lines daily. He observes the tactics, the progress, the costs. He sees men dying in hedgerows for yards of ground. He sees careful, methodical attacks that achieve local successes but fail to break through. He sees the same patterns that led to stalemate in the First World War. He paces his headquarters tent for hours, studying maps, calculating distances, planning operations he's not authorized to conduct. His staff watches nervously. They've never seen the general this restless, this frustrated. One evening he stands at the edge of the command post, staring toward the front lines. The sound of distant artillery rumbles like thunder. Men are dying out there, dying slowly because the advance is slow. Every day we wait, Germans dig deeper, he says to no one in particular. Every day we plan, they prepare. We're giving them the one thing they need most, time. But what can he do? Third Army isn't activated yet. His role hasn't been defined. He can only watch and wait and feel the frustration build like pressure in a boiler. What Patton doesn't know, what no one tells him, is that his inactivity is deliberate. It's part of a plan that exists at the highest levels of Allied command. July 20th, 1944. A conference room at SHAEF headquarters. Eisenhower and General Omar Bradley meet privately. Bradley commands the American ground forces in Normandy. He's Patton's immediate superior and one of the few men who can manage him. Eisenhower lights a cigarette, offers one to Bradley. They smoke in silence for a moment. Outside, staff officers hurry past with reports and briefings. Inside, The two men discuss a weapon they're not ready to use yet. "How's George?" Eisenhower asks. Bradley smiles slightly. "Like a caged tiger. He's visiting the front every day, driving my division commanders crazy with suggestions." "Suggestions?" "You know George. Suggestions delivered with the subtlety of a tank assault." Eisenhower studies the map on the wall, the static front lines, the minimal progress. "We need to break out of this. The bocage is bleeding us dry." "Operation Cobra," Bradley says. "Late July. We're concentrating air power and armor for a breakthrough near Saint-Lô. Blast a hole in their lines, pour through before they can react. And then? Then we need someone who won't stop to consolidate, someone who'll exploit the gap before the Germans can establish a new line." Bradley pauses. "Someone like George." Eisenhower nods slowly. This is the conversation they've been avoiding, the conversation about using Patton's particular talents. "The Germans know our other generals," Eisenhower says. "They've studied Montgomery for years, analyzed Bradley's methods, predicted Hodges' tactics. They know how we think, how we fight." "But they don't know George," Bradley finishes, "because George doesn't think like other generals." "That's what worries me." Eisenhower's voice is quiet. "We can't control chaos." Bradley takes a long drag on his cigarette. "Maybe we don't need to control it. Maybe we just need to point it in the right direction." He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. "The Germans think Patton is still in England, leading First Army Group, part of our deception operation for Calais. They're watching for him across the channel, not here. So we keep him hidden until Cobra opens the gap," Eisenhower says slowly, understanding the strategy. "Let the Germans keep looking in the wrong place. Then we unleash George when they least expect it. And pray we can manage the consequences." Eisenhower doesn't disagree. Managing George Patton is like managing a thunderstorm. You can't control it. You can only hope it strikes where you need it and doesn't destroy too much in the process. But right now, Eisenhower needs a thunderstorm, needs something to break the stalemate, something the Germans can't prepare for because it doesn't follow patterns they recognize. "We save him for the breakthrough," Eisenhower decides. "Keep Third Army in reserve. When Cobra opens the gap, we activate George. Give him one simple order, which is exploit. Don't consolidate, don't coordinate, just exploit the breakthrough and keep moving until something stops him." Bradley absorbs this. It goes against every principle of coordinated warfare, against every lesson about maintaining unity of command. But those principles have produced 8 weeks of stalemate. "George will love it," Bradley says. "Simple mission, no restrictions, freedom to maneuver." "He'll also ignore every other instruction we give him," Eisenhower adds. "You know he will. The moment we activate Third Army, George will do exactly what George wants to do." "Yes, sir. But isn't that the point?" Eisenhower doesn't answer immediately, stares at the map, at the static front lines that need to move, at the careful plans that have produced minimal results. Finally, he nods. "Yes, that's exactly the point. We need someone who'll break our plans, because our plans aren't working." July 25th, 1944. Operation Cobra begins. The plan is methodical, calculated, everything Patton would hate and everything conventional warfare demands. Concentrate overwhelming force at a single point. Break through. Exploit. At 0940 hours, the Air Armada arrives. 2,500 aircraft, heavy bombers, medium bombers, fighter bombers. They carry thousands of tons of high explosives. Their target, a concentrated section of German front line near Saint-Lô, barely 5 miles wide. The bombardment is apocalyptic. Bombs fall in a rolling thunder that can be heard 50 miles away. The earth heaves, trees vaporize. German positions simply cease to exist. Entire units vanish in the explosions. The landscape transforms into a moonscape of overlapping craters. Some bombs fall short. They always do in operations this massive. American troops die in their own bombardment. The friendly fire casualties are horrific. But the bombing continues. The plan demands it. Break the German line, whatever the cost. When the bombing stops, infantry advances through the smoke and dust. They find devastation beyond imagination. German soldiers stumble from bunkers, deafened, concussed, unable to fight. Some surrender immediately, others are too disoriented to resist. But not all German positions are destroyed. Some survived in deep bunkers, some were outside the bombing zone. They fight back. Machine guns open up from unexpected angles, artillery begins falling, the advance slows. For 3 days, American forces grind forward. Progress is measured, methodical, by the book. Secure one position, consolidate, bring up supplies, prepare for the next advance, repeat. It's working, slowly, carefully. The gap is opening. But it's not the breakthrough that planners hoped for. It's another hard fight. More casualties, more slow progress. Patton watches from his headquarters. He studies the reports. He sees the pattern. Cobra is succeeding, but it's succeeding carefully. The gap will open, but it will open slowly. And slow means the Germans will have time to react, time to bring up reserves, time to establish new defensive lines. Time means the advantage will be lost. On July 31st, at 2100 hours, Patton's phone rings. It's Bradley. George, 3rd Army activates tomorrow at 0600 hours. Patton stands. The moment he's been waiting for. 8 weeks of watching, 8 weeks of planning, 8 weeks of restraint that went against every instinct he possesses. Give me my orders, Brad. Exploit the Cobra gap, drive east, keep the Germans off balance. There's a pause. Patton knows Bradley is choosing his next words carefully. Show me what you've been dying to show me, George. Another pause. Patton understands what Bradley isn't saying, what Eisenhower isn't saying. They're giving him permission, not to follow the careful plan, permission to do what Patton does best. Speed, Brad. I'm going to show you what happens when you don't wait for perfect. He hangs up, stands alone in his headquarters. The maps spread before him show the Cobra Gap, the German positions, the roads east. He studies them for 3 hours, not planning every detail. That's not how Patton works. He's absorbing the terrain, the possibilities, the opportunities. At midnight, he finally moves. Not to sleep, to issue orders to his division commanders. Orders that will change everything. Orders that violate every principle they learned at West Point. Orders that will create chaos the Germans cannot counter. His final thought before dawn, standing alone in the operations room, studying the maps one last time. Tomorrow, I stop asking permission. Tomorrow, the cage opens. And God help the Germans. Because George Patton is done waiting. August 1st, 1944. 0600 hours. 3rd Army becomes operational. The orders go out before sunrise. Division commanders receive them by radio, by courier, by direct phone call from Patton himself. The orders are unlike anything they've received before, unlike anything taught at West Point or Command and Staff College. Bypass resistance, maintain momentum, ignore your flanks. One colonel reads his orders twice, certain he's misunderstood. He calls for clarification, gets Patton on the line. Sir, the orders say ignore flanks. Did you mean secure flanks? Patton's voice comes through clear and hard. I meant what I wrote, Colonel. Ignore your flanks. Let the Germans worry about their flanks. You worry about moving forward. But sir, doctrine. Doctrine gets men killed slowly. You have your orders, follow them. The line goes dead. The colonel stares at the phone. Everything he learned about warfare just became irrelevant. He has his orders. Orders that violate every principle he knows. But they're clear, unmistakable. Move fast. Don't stop. Across 3rd Army's front, the same conversations happen. Commanders receive orders that seem designed to create chaos rather than prevent it. But the orders come from Patton. And whatever else Patton is, he's not insane. Reckless, maybe. Aggressive, definitely. But not insane. At 0630 hours, 3rd Army moves. The advance doesn't look like a military operation. It looks like a flood. Multiple columns pour through the Cobra Gap simultaneously. Tank units take different roads, racing east in parallel. Infantry follows in trucks, moving faster than infantry has moved since the German Blitzkrieg of 1940. Artillery batteries displace forward before the enemy even realizes they're under attack. By noon, Third Army units are reporting positions that make no sense. Towns that weren't on the objective list are being captured. Road junctions that weren't supposed to be reached for days are being secured. German rear areas are being overrun before the Germans realize American tanks are there. The radio traffic is chaos. Units calling in positions that can't be verified. Commanders reporting enemy contact, then reporting the enemy fled before combat. Scouts finding German supply dumps unguarded, fuel stocks intact, ready for capture. At Third Army headquarters, staff officers try to update the situation map. They can't keep pace. By the time they mark a unit's position, that unit has reported a new position miles further east. The markers become approximate, educated guesses. The map becomes less a record of reality and more a hope that reality hasn't moved too far ahead. German commanders experience the same confusion from the opposite direction. They receive reports of American tanks in areas that should be secure. They order defensive positions established, only to learn those positions are already behind American lines. They try to communicate with forward units and discover the phone lines have been cut. They send radio messages and get no response because the radio stations have been captured. For the Germans, it's a nightmare. The kind of nightmare they used to inflict on their enemies. The kind of nightmare they thought belonged to them alone. By the end of the first day, Third Army has advanced 30 miles. Other Allied units took 2 months to advance that far. Patton's forces did it in 12 hours. August 3rd, 0200 hours. Patton stands alone in his command tent. The maps spread before him show the chaos he's created. The situation is unstable, dangerous. His forces are spread across 50 miles of front, moving in multiple directions, with gaps between units large enough to drive German divisions through. Any military textbook would call this a disaster waiting to happen. Overextended forces, exposed flanks, vulnerable supply lines, all the conditions for catastrophic defeat. Patton knows this. He's read the same textbooks, studied the same campaigns where overextension led to disaster. Napoleon in Russia, Lee at Gettysburg. The list is long and bloody. But Patton also knows something the textbooks don't teach, something he learned in combat, not in classrooms. Confusion is a weapon. When the enemy can't find you, they can't kill you. When you move faster than the enemy can react, you're not vulnerable. The enemy is. When your units are scattered across 50 miles, the enemy doesn't know where to counterattack. When your flanks are exposed, the enemy's flanks are equally exposed, and the side that exploits that exposure first wins. Still, doubt creeps in during these dark hours. Doubt always does when you're alone, and the decisions are yours, and thousands of lives depend on being right. What if the textbooks are correct? What if careful, methodical warfare is the only way to minimize casualties? What if his aggression is just gambling with men's lives? He lights a cigarette. The match flare illuminates his face for a moment. 58 years old. Too old for doubt. Too experienced for second-guessing. But the doubt comes anyway. He crushes it the way he crushes the cigarette. There's no room for hesitation now. The army is in motion. Thousands of men are driving east because he ordered them to. Stopping now would waste everything they've achieved. Slowing down would give the Germans time to recover. The only direction is forward. The only speed is faster. Patton returns to the maps, studies the roads, calculates distances, not planning every detail. That's impossible at this pace, but maintaining awareness, keeping the mental picture of where his forces are, where they're going, what they might encounter. At 0400 hours, he finally allows himself 2 hours of sleep. Not because he's tired, because he needs to be sharp for what's coming. And what's coming is the moment when his gamble either pays off spectacularly or fails catastrophically. There's no middle ground, not at this speed. August 3rd, 1400 hours. The German counterattack hits. It strikes Third Army's southern flank. An entire panzer division, held in reserve, commits to battle. German tanks and infantry assault the gap between 2 of Patton's advancing columns. If they break through, they'll cut Third Army's supply lines, trap the forward elements, turn Patton's aggressive advance into a surrounded disaster. The staff officers at 3rd Army Headquarters receive the reports with barely controlled panic. The situation map shows the German attack driving into the gap, shows American units on both sides being pushed back, shows the supply route being threatened. One major finds Patton studying reconnaissance photos. "Sir, German counterattack on our southern flank. Panzer Division strength. They're trying to cut us off." Patton doesn't look up from the photos. "How far have they advanced?" 3 miles in 2 hours, sir. They're pushing hard." "Good. Let them push." The major hesitates. "Sir? How far behind our lead elements is this counterattack?" The major checks his notes. "Approximately 15 miles, sir." Patton finally looks up. There's something in his eyes, not concern, anticipation. "Get me Colonel Walker, 4th Armored Division." The call connects. Patton's orders are brief. "Walker, German counterattack hit our southern flank. They're pushing north, trying to cut supply lines. I'm giving you a new mission. Stop advancing east, turn south. Get behind that counterattack. You have 4 hours." There's a pause on the line. What Patton is ordering seems impossible. Turn an entire armored division 90 degrees while in motion. Navigate 15 miles of enemy territory. Hit the Germans from an unexpected direction. All in 4 hours. "Understood, sir. 4 hours." Patton hangs up, returns to his reconnaissance photos. The major stands there, uncertain. "Sir, shouldn't we establish defensive positions, bring up reserves to contain the breakthrough?" Patton marks the map. "In 3 hours, Walker's tanks will be here. Behind them, the hunters become the hunted." The major begins to understand. Patton isn't defending against the counterattack. He's using it as bait. August 3rd, 1830 hours. The trap springs. The German Panzer Division is driving hard into what they think is a gap in American lines. They've pushed 3 miles, encountered resistance, but nothing they can't handle. Their commander is confident. In another hour, they'll cut the American supply route, trap the overextended American forces, turn this reckless advance into a textbook example of why you don't overextend. Then, reports come in from the rear. American tanks, heavy force, moving fast, coming from the east. The German commander doesn't understand at first. American tanks to the east? That's impossible. All American forces are to the west. They're advancing east, which means their rear is west. American tanks can't be to the east unless the Americans bypassed his position. Unless they're so far advanced that his counterattack is actually behind their front lines. The realization hits like a physical blow. He's not attacking the American rear. He's in the American rear, and now American tanks are behind him. Walker's 4th Armored Division hits the German flanks at 1845 hours. The Germans try to redeploy, try to face this new threat, but they're in column formation, optimized for advancing north, not for fighting east. American tanks pour fire into their flanks. German vehicles explode. Infantry scatters. Within 90 minutes, it's over. The German counterattack isn't just stopped, it's destroyed. Tanks burning, infantry surrendering. The Panzer Division that was supposed to trap Patton's forces has itself been trapped. The German division commander, captured, is brought to an American command post. He sits in shock, staring at nothing. An intelligence officer asks him what happened. The German speaks slowly, like a man trying to explain a nightmare. "We were trying to surround you, but you were already around us. How? How do you move so fast?" The intelligence officer has no answer. Neither does anyone else in 3rd Army. They just follow Patton's orders, and somehow, impossibly, it works. When Patton receives the report of the counterattack's destruction, he shows no triumph, no satisfaction, just nods once and returns to the maps. His staff expected celebration. They destroyed an entire Panzer Division, turned a potential disaster into a victory. But Patton isn't celebrating. He's already thinking 3 moves ahead. The German counterattack failed. That means the Germans will be more cautious, more careful, which means he needs to move even faster, stay ahead of their caution, keep them reacting instead of planning. To his operations officer, he says only, When we move fast enough, they can't hurt us because they can't find us. The moment we slow down, we become targets. The operations officer writes it down. Later, he'll put it in his memoir. But right now, he's just trying to keep up with a general who thinks in dimensions most officers can't comprehend. Patton's realization from the counterattack is profound. He's not just winning because he's moving fast. He's winning because speed itself disrupts enemy planning, creates confusion, forces reactions instead of deliberate action. And an enemy forced to react is an enemy already beaten. Somewhere in Normandy, at German headquarters, the same night, Oberst Heinrich Müller is 42 years old, career officer, 7th Army Intelligence Section. For 3 days, he's been trying to make sense of reports that don't make sense. American units in positions they shouldn't reach for weeks, entire German battalions losing contact because communication lines are cut, supply depots overrun before they can be evacuated, defensive positions bypassed before they can be manned. Müller spreads his maps on the table, plots American positions based on the reports he's received. The plot looks insane. American units scattered across 100 miles of front, gaps everywhere, no coherent line, just clusters of forces driving in multiple directions. It should be a gift, an opportunity for counterattack. But every counterattack has failed. Every attempt to exploit the gaps has found American forces where they shouldn't be. His aide brings coffee. Real coffee, not the ersatz substitute that's becoming common. Small luxuries for officers trying to manage catastrophe. Herr Oberst, the latest reports. More positions, more impossible advances. Müller plots them mechanically. His mind is elsewhere, trying to see the pattern, trying to understand what's happening. He stares at the map for a long moment. Then it hits him. The pattern he's been missing. The terrible familiarity of what he's seeing. "This is blitzkrieg," he says softly. The aide looks up. "Sir? This is what we did to France in 1940. Fast movement, bypass resistance, keep the enemy off balance." Müller's voice is hollow. "We called it Panzerschreck, tank terror. We moved so fast, the French couldn't establish defensive lines, couldn't coordinate counterattacks, couldn't do anything except retreat and die." He traces the American advance on his map. The pattern is unmistakable. The same tactics Germany used to conquer France in 6 weeks are now being used against them. The irony would be darkly amusing if it wasn't destroying his army. "But sir, the Americans aren't supposed to—" "The Americans learned." Müller's voice is flat. "They watched us, studied us, and now they're doing it better than we ever did." The aide pulls out intelligence files. "We need to identify the American commander. Someone is coordinating this." Müller already knows, has suspected for the past day, but now he needs confirmation. What American forces are operating in this sector? The aide flips through pages. The American Third Army is the primary force, activated August 1st. Commander is, he pauses, checks again, General George Smith Patton Jr. Müller goes absolutely still. "Patton?" "Yes, Herr Oberst. Do you know him?" Müller knows him. Every German intelligence officer knows him. Patton commanded in Sicily, North Africa. He's aggressive, controversial, brilliant in combat and impossible to control. The kind of general who wins battles and creates scandals in equal measure. But the latest intelligence reported Patton was in England, leading 1st Army Group, part of an Allied deception operation to convince Germany the main invasion would come at Calais, not Normandy. Intelligence said he was commanding 1st Army Group across the Channel. The aide checks the files again. 1st Army Group was a deception, Herr Oberst. It doesn't exist. Patton was held in reserve, activated here on August 1st. The pieces fall into place in Müller's mind. The complete picture of Allied strategy becomes clear. And it's brilliant, terrifyingly brilliant. "They hid him," Müller says slowly. "Let us think he was in England, made us watch the Channel for him, then activated him here, in Normandy, after the breakthrough began." "Why hide him, sir?" Müller understands now, understands the entire game, because we can analyze other American generals. Montgomery is methodical. We know his patterns. Bradley is careful. We can predict his moves. Hodges is conventional. We understand his doctrine. He looks at his aide directly. But Patton? Patton doesn't follow patterns, doesn't use doctrine. He operates on instinct, aggression, pure chaos. Then how do we counter him? We don't. Muller's voice is resigned. You can't prepare for chaos. You can only react to it. And by the time you react, he's already somewhere else, already executing the next move you didn't predict. The aide absorbs this. The implications are devastating. What do we report to Berlin? Muller considers. The truth is unpalatable. The truth is that 7th Army is being destroyed by methods Germany invented. The truth is that an American general is beating them at their own game. But the truth is still the truth. Report that the American commander in this sector is Patton. Report that his forces are advancing at unprecedented speed using our own blitzkrieg tactics. Report that traditional defensive methods are ineffective against this pace of operations. And recommendations, Herr Oberst? Muller has none. How do you defend against an enemy who moves faster than you can react? How do you establish lines when those lines are obsolete before they're complete? How do you coordinate when your communications are constantly being cut? No recommendations, just warn them. Warn Berlin that this isn't conventional combat. This is something we've never faced before. After the aide leaves, Muller sits alone with his maps. He traces the American advance with his finger, tries to project where they'll be tomorrow, where they might strike next. But projection is impossible. Patton doesn't move predictably, doesn't follow logical lines of advance. He goes where opportunity exists, where the enemy is weak, where speed creates advantage. Muller realizes something that chills him more than any tactical defeat. The Americans didn't just learn blitzkrieg, they perfected it, made it faster, more aggressive, more unpredictable. Germany created the doctrine, proved its effectiveness, taught the world that speed and aggression could defeat any defense. Now that doctrine is being used against them, and there's nothing they can do except watch and document the collapse. Somewhere out there, Patton is moving, planning the next thrust, identifying the next weakness, creating the next crisis German commanders will fail to counter. And Muller can only sit here with his obsolete maps and watch his army die. August 6th, 1800 hours, Mayenne River. Patton stands on a small rise overlooking the river. The Mayenne isn't large, maybe 100 feet across. Current moderate, banks not too steep. Under normal circumstances, a competent engineering unit could bridge it properly in 2 days. But these aren't normal circumstances. The Mayenne River is over 100 miles from where Operation Cobra began 6 days ago. It wasn't even on the current objectives list. Allied planning had this river marked for mid-September, a full month away. Patton's forces have reached it in 6 days. His engineering captain approaches, young man, competent, nervous about addressing a 3-star general directly. "Sir, we can have a proper crossing prepared in..." Patton cuts him off with a raised hand, points across the river. "What do you see over there, Captain?" The captain squints, studies the far bank. "German positions, sir, maybe company strength. They look surprised we're here." Surprised, unprepared, unready. Patton's voice is quiet, hard. "How long to prepare a proper crossing?" 36 hours, sir. Full bridges, support for armor, secure both banks according to..." In 36 hours, those surprised Germans become prepared Germans. They'll have reinforcements, artillery registered on crossing points, infantry dug in. Patton turns to look at the captain directly. "How many men die if we cross against prepared defenses?" The captain does the math in his head. His face pales slightly. "Estimated 400 to 500 casualties for a deliberate crossing against resistance, sir." "And if we cross tonight? Improvise bridges? Accept some risk?" "Maybe 40 to 50 casualties? But, sir, the risk of bridge collapse, the lack of proper support..." Patton's voice becomes even quieter, even harder. "Captain, you have 3 hours. Use what materials you have. Improvise the rest. Get infantry across in boats if you have to. But in 3 hours, I want men on that far bank." Sir, that's not how doctrine is written by men who weren't here, who didn't see what you see, who didn't have to choose between 40 casualties tonight or 500 casualties in 2 days. Patton pauses. 3 hours, Captain, or I swim across myself and you explain to General Bradley why his commanding general drowned. The captain snaps a salute, runs back to his engineering units, starts shouting orders. Men scramble. This isn't how crossings are supposed to work, but nothing about Third Army works the way it's supposed to. Patton watches the river, calculating, not the engineering details, that's the captain's job, calculating the strategic implications. The Germans aren't expecting American forces here. Not yet, maybe not for weeks. Which means the far bank is likely held. Which means a rapid crossing could secure a bridgehead before the Germans can react. But rapid means casualties. Means men dying in the river because bridges aren't complete. Means accepting losses for speed. He knows what his decision looks like. Knows that historians will debate whether the speed was worth the cost. Whether 40 men dying tonight is justified by preventing 500 deaths in 2 days. But Patton learned long ago that leadership means making those calculations, choosing between bad options and worse options, living with the consequences of decisions made too fast for perfect information. At 2,100 hours, the crossing begins. August 7th, 2100 hours, the river crossing. Darkness covers the Mayenne. A thin crescent moon provides barely enough light to see the far bank. Engineers work by feel as much as sight, afraid to use lights that would draw German fire. The first boats launch, rubber rafts carrying infantry, 12 men per boat, paddling frantically against the current. German positions on the far bank are quiet. Maybe they haven't noticed. Maybe they're waiting. Halfway across, machine gun fire erupts. Tracers cut through the darkness. Men scream. One boat takes direct hits, deflates, dumps its occupants into the current. Some swim, some sink, dragged down by equipment. On the near bank, Patton watches from 200 yards away. His face shows nothing, but his jaw works. His hands clench and unclench at his sides. More boats launch. The engineers are racing now, pontoons being positioned, planks being laid. It's not elegant, it's barely functional, but it's happening. A lieutenant runs up. "Sir, we're taking casualties. Should we halt until we can suppress the German positions?" "No, keep pushing boats across. The Germans only have so much ammunition. Once our infantry gets across in strength, they'll withdraw." "But sir..." "Lieutenant, every minute we wait is a minute the Germans bring up reinforcements." Patton's voice is hard, final. "Continue the crossing." The lieutenant salutes and runs back. Patton remains watching, close enough to see, close enough to hear the wounded crying for medics, close enough to smell the cordite and blood. By midnight, the first elements are across, a toehold, barely 100 yards of the far bank. German fire slackens as American infantry begin flanking the machine gun positions. The defenders are few, surprised. They expected American forces to be miles away. Not here, not tonight. At 0100 hours, the first tanks cross. The improvised bridge flexes dangerously under their weight. Engineers watch with held breath. Boards crack. Pontoons sink lower in the water, but the structure holds. Patton stands in the darkness, watching. His aide approaches with coffee. Patton takes it but doesn't drink. "Sir, perhaps you should rest. The division commanders have this under control." Patton shakes his head. "These men are dying on my orders. The least I can do is watch." "Sir, you haven't slept in. I'll sleep when the bridgehead is secure." Patton's voice is rough, tired. "How many casualties so far?" The aide checks his notes by flashlight. 47 wounded, 18 killed. Engineers took the worst of it when that pontoon section collapsed. 65 casualties. 65 men who woke up this morning not knowing this would be their last day. Or their last day whole. At 0300 hours, his operations officer brings the report he's been waiting for. "Sir, bridgehead secure. Far bank controlled for half a mile in each direction. Engineers estimate full bridge capacity by 0700. Good. Order all units to push through immediately upon crossing. No consolidation, no waiting for follow-on forces. Exploit before the Germans realize what's happened. The operations officer salutes and leaves. Patton remains, staring at the river, at the crossing site where men died because he ordered speed over safety. At 0600 hours, August 8th, the bridgehead is secure. Third Army continues its advance east. The Mayenne crossing is complete, and Patton still hasn't reported it to headquarters. His staff waits for him to make the required report, to inform Schaeff that Third Army has crossed a major river and is continuing east. But Patton studies the maps instead, calculating the next moves. Finally, his operations officer asks, "Sir, shall we report the crossing to Schaeff?" Patton doesn't look up from the maps. "Tomorrow." "Sir, protocol requires immediate notification of—" "Tomorrow." Patton's voice is final. "Tonight, we're too busy exploiting the crossing. We'll report tomorrow when we're too far ahead for them to order us to stop." After the staff leaves, Patton sits alone with his maps. He knows what he's doing, knows he's deliberately withholding information from higher headquarters, knows this violates every protocol. But he also knows that if he reports now, Schaeff will order him to consolidate, to secure the bridgehead, to wait for adjacent units to catch up, to coordinate the next phase. And coordination takes time. Time the Germans will use to recover, to establish new defensive lines, to turn his bridgehead into another grinding battle. Better to ask forgiveness than permission, especially when forgiveness comes after victory. He marks the next objectives on his map. Towns the Germans think are safe, road junctions they haven't reinforced, opportunities that exist only because Third Army is moving too fast for the enemy to react. Tomorrow, Schaeff will learn what he's done, and by then, he'll be another 20 miles east, too far ahead to rein in without wasting everything he's achieved. It's a calculated risk, but everything at this speed is a calculated risk. The difference is that Patton's calculations have worked, so far. August 8th, 0630 hours. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. The liaison officer's arrival causes immediate tension. The overnight position reports he carries should be routine. They're never routine when Third Army is involved, but this morning feels different. Senior staff officers gather as the map is spread. The first markers go up, positions based on radio intercepts and scout reports. Each marker represents a Third Army unit. The markers advance across the map like a spreading flood, further east, further north. Each position seemingly impossible. A colonel traces the advance with his finger, stops, recounts, checks his notes. "These coordinates can't be right." The liaison officer pulls out the original reports. His hands shake. "Sir, I've verified them. Multiple independent sources." Another officer joins them, measures distances, cross-references with the operational timeline. His face goes pale. Third Army has advanced over 60 miles in 1 week. They've reached the Mayenne River. Silence. The kind of silence that comes when reality violates every expectation. The Mayenne wasn't even on the objectives list until September. Check again. There must be an error. They check. They verify. They cross-reference with aerial reconnaissance photographs that arrived overnight. Every source confirms the same impossible truth. Third Army isn't where it's supposed to be, not even close. They've advanced further in 1 week than some Allied units have advanced in 2 months. They've crossed rivers without authorization, captured towns that weren't objectives, created a salient so deep that adjacent units can't maintain contact. The operations room fills with voices, theories, concerns. Some staff officers argue this is disaster in the making. Overextension, vulnerable flanks, supply lines stretched to breaking. One determined German counterattack could cut off the entire Third Army spearhead. Others see opportunity. The Germans are reeling. Their communications are disrupted. Their defenses are collapsing. This isn't overextension. This is breakthrough. The debate intensifies. Then the doors open. Eisenhower enters. The room falls silent immediately. Officers step back from the map table, creating space. Eisenhower approaches slowly. He reads the tension before he reads the map. He studies the markers. His face reveals nothing. Years of command have taught him to control his reactions, to think before responding, to calculate before deciding. His finger traces Third Army's advance. From the Cobra starting point near Saint-Lô, following the route east and north. The route that should have taken months has been covered in days. The objectives that should have been September's goals have been achieved in August. His finger stops at the Mayenne River. Multiple markers cluster around the crossing points. Bridges that shouldn't exist, bridgeheads that weren't authorized. Eisenhower stands perfectly still. The officers around him wait. Some have served with him long enough to recognize this stillness. It's the moment when Eisenhower processes information, weighs options, considers implications at multiple levels simultaneously. When he speaks, his voice is quiet, almost conversational, but it carries across the silent room. "You crossed without telling us." It's phrased as a question, but it isn't one. It's a statement, a realization, an acknowledgement of something Eisenhower already knew would happen, but now must confront. No one responds. What can they say? The evidence is on the map. Third Army has operated beyond the boundaries of the plan, beyond coordination, beyond control. Eisenhower continues studying the map. His strategic mind processes the implications. Tactically, Third Army is overextended. The gaps between units are large enough for German divisions to exploit. Supply lines are stretched thin. Adjacent units can't maintain contact. Operationally, Third Army has created an opportunity. The German 7th Army is retreating into a pocket. Canadian and British forces are pushing south. If the pocket closes, it could trap two entire German armies. Strategically, this changes everything. The careful plan for methodical advance across France is obsolete. The timeline is compressed. Objectives are being achieved months ahead of schedule. Eisenhower absorbs all of this in seconds, makes the calculations that supreme commanders must make, balances risk against opportunity, protocol against results, control against chaos. He turns to his chief of staff. "How far ahead of projections is Third Army?" 60 miles, sir, as of last night's reports. By now, possibly further. German response? An intelligence officer steps forward. "Sir, intercepted communications show confusion. 7th Army is attempting to establish defensive lines, but Third Army keeps bypassing them. Communications are breaking down. Some German units are reporting American forces in their rear areas. Our casualties? Third Army casualties are approximately 3,000 over the past week. German casualties are estimated at 15 to 20,000. Additionally, we've captured significant numbers of prisoners and equipment." Eisenhower does the math. 3,000 casualties in exchange for massive territorial gains and 5 to 7 times the enemy casualties. By any measure, a success. But success achieved through methods that violate every principle of coordinated warfare. He sits in one of the chairs surrounding the map table, lights a cigarette. The staff waits. This is the moment. The decision that will define how the campaign proceeds. Some expect fury, expect orders to rein Patton in, to restore coordination, to enforce the careful planning that allows Allied forces to function as a unified whole. But Eisenhower surprises them. "Gentlemen, George has created a problem." Pause. Officers exchange glances. "He's given us an opportunity we didn't plan for. The German 7th Army is collapsing. If we can maintain pressure, we might achieve an encirclement, trap two German armies, destroy their position in France." Another pause. The implication sinks in. Planning how to exploit this opportunity will take time. Time we don't have. By the time we develop a coordinated plan, the opportunity will be gone. The Germans will recover, establish new defensive lines, and will be back to grinding through hedgerows. Eisenhower stubs out his cigarette, stands, looks at the map one more time. "Let Patton run." Silence. Shock. Some officers clearly want to object. This violates every principle, encourages Patton's worst instincts, sets a dangerous precedent. But Eisenhower's decision is made. His voice becomes harder, more final. "George is already 60 miles ahead. Pulling him back wastes what he's achieved. The question isn't whether we approve of his methods. The question is whether we can use what he's created." He turns to face his staff directly. "I don't like chaos. I prefer coordination, planning, unity of effort. But right now, the Germans are in chaos, and Patton is the only general I have who who thrives in it. Orders begin flowing. Canadian forces to increase pressure from the north, British forces to maintain their positions and prevent German reinforcement, Third Army to continue offensive operations. The careful plan is abandoned. The new plan is to exploit Patton's breakthrough before the opportunity closes. After the staff disperses to implement the orders, Eisenhower remains alone in the operations room. His aide approaches carefully.
"Sir, are you certain about this decision?"
Eisenhower studies the map. "No, I'm not certain. But certainty is a luxury we don't have. The British won't like this. General Montgomery is fighting a different kind of battle, a necessary battle, but not the battle that wins wars quickly." Eisenhower lights another cigarette. "Monty is brilliant at set-piece operations, at careful preparation, at minimizing casualties through planning. I need him. We need him. But Patton wins by breaking plans, by creating chaos the enemy can't counter." Eisenhower's voice drops. "I don't need to like George's methods. I just need to use them." The aide waits. There's more coming. He can sense it. Eisenhower walks to the window, watches staff officers hurrying across the courtyard below, all following procedures, all doing things by the book. "You know what I learned from George?" Eisenhower's voice is quiet, almost reflective.
"Sir?"
"That all my careful planning, all my coordination, all my control, it only works when the enemy cooperates, when they follow patterns we can predict, when they behave rationally." He turns back to face his aide. "But when they panic, when their communications break down, when chaos overwhelms their command structure, my careful plans become irrelevant. That's when you need Patton. That's when I need someone who doesn't care about the plan, who sees opportunity in chaos instead of danger." Eisenhower pauses, studies the map again. George isn't just tolerating chaos, he's creating it deliberately, using it as a weapon. The aide writes this down, understanding that he's witnessing something important, a transformation in Eisenhower's thinking. "Don't misunderstand me," Eisenhower continues. His voice becomes harder. "I'm not endorsing what George did. Crossing that river without authorization violates protocols. Operating beyond coordination creates risks.
If this goes wrong, if the Germans counterattack successfully, we could lose an entire army.
Then why approve it now?" Eisenhower meets his aide's eyes directly. "Because war isn't won by generals who follow every rule perfectly. It's won by knowing which rules to break and when to break them." He points to the map, to Patton's deep penetration into German-held territory. George knows. He's proven he knows. The question is whether I'm smart enough to let him keep proving it. A pause. Then Eisenhower adds, quieter, "And I hope he's right. Because I just bet 2 armies on a man who thinks asking permission is wasting time." The aide understands. This isn't just a tactical decision. It's Eisenhower accepting that sometimes the commander's job isn't to control everything. Sometimes it's to recognize when control itself is the obstacle. "One more thing," Eisenhower says. "Make sure this conversation doesn't leave this room. Officially, I'm managing Patton, coordinating his operations, maintaining unity of command." "And unofficially, sir?" "Unofficially, I'm learning that chaos has its place in warfare, and that the general who masters chaos might be more valuable than the general who prevents it." He turns back to the window. The conversation is over, but the aide will remember it. Years later, writing his memoir, he'll describe this as the moment Eisenhower stopped trying to control Patton and started trying to aim him. The moment when the supreme commander of Allied forces accepted that sometimes you have to let the wild ones run, and pray the destruction they cause hits the enemy instead of your own plans.
August 21st, 1944.
The Falaise Pocket. 2 weeks of sustained operations have created what military historians will call one of the greatest encirclements of the war. Third Armies advance north and east, Canadian and Polish forces pushing south, British forces maintaining pressure from the west. The German 7th and 5th Panzer armies caught between. The Germans fought desperately to keep escape routes open. They knew what was happening, knew they were being encircled, but every attempt to break out was met with artillery fire and airstrikes. Every defensive position was bypassed or overwhelmed. The roads are choked with destroyed vehicles, tanks abandoned when they ran out of fuel, trucks burned by aircraft, horse-drawn wagons. The Germans still use thousands of horses for logistics, shot to pieces. Dead horses bloat in the summer heat. The smell is overwhelming. Allied artillery pounds the pocket continuously. Fire missions called in every few minutes. The ground trembles. The air fills with smoke and dust. This is industrial warfare at its most brutal. Not the dramatic tank battles or infantry charges, just concentrated firepower, reducing an army to wreckage. By August 21st, the pocket closes completely. The last escape routes are cut. Approximately 60,000 German soldiers are trapped. Some will escape through gaps that open briefly. Most won't. The final count? 50,000 prisoners, 10,000 killed, equipment losses that stagger the imagination, hundreds of tanks, thousands of vehicles, artillery pieces, small arms, everything an army needs to fight. Strategically, the Falaise pocket breaks German power in France. There's no longer an organized front line, just scattered units trying to retreat to Germany. The campaign that was supposed to take until winter is effectively over by late summer. But the victory has a cost that doesn't appear in the statistics.
August 22nd. Patton drives through the pocket. His jeep moves slowly. The roads are barely passable, wreckage everywhere. His driver navigates carefully between destroyed vehicles and bodies still being collected. Patton's face is expressionless. He's seen battlefields before. This isn't his first war, not his first victory. But the scale is different. The Falaise pocket is square miles of devastation, the concentrated result of 2 weeks of encirclement and destruction. They pass groups of prisoners being marched to collection points, thousands of men, young and old, Wehrmacht and SS, all defeated, all exhausted. Some look at Patton's jeep with hatred, most look at nothing, just shuffle along in columns, going wherever they're told. They pass a field hospital, wounded being treated, American and German side by side. Medics don't distinguish, they just try to save whoever they can. A young American soldier, can't be more than 20, sits with his leg in a splint. He sees Patton's stars and tries to stand. Salute. Patton waves him down, stops the jeep, approaches. How are you, son? Fine, sir. Just a busted leg. Doc says I'll be stateside in a month. Good. You did well. Your unit took objectives we didn't think possible. The soldier grins despite the pain. We just drove fast, sir. Didn't stop till we ran out of gas or Germans. Mostly ran out of gas. Patton almost smiles. Almost. That's warfare, son. Move fast. Hit hard. Don't give the enemy time to think. He returns to the jeep. They continue through the pocket. The devastation continues for miles. Every field tells the same story. Attempted retreat, concentrated fire, destruction. They drive in silence for another mile. Then Patton tells his driver to stop. Just stops in the middle of the road. Surrounded by destruction. He gets out, walks to the edge of a field. The field is cratered, burned, scattered with equipment and bodies being collected for burial. His aide follows, uncertain. Patton stands there for a long minute, just looking. When he speaks, his voice is different, quieter, the hard edge gone. I dream about them, you know, the ones who died because I ordered speed. The aide doesn't respond, doesn't know how to. Every night. I see their faces, the engineers who drowned at the Mayenne because I wouldn't wait for proper bridges, the tankers who burned because I pushed them into positions without support, the infantry who died in gaps I created by moving too fast. Sir, you saved more lives than... I know the math. Patton's voice hardens again, but there's something underneath it now, something raw. I know that careful warfare kills more men slowly than fast warfare kills quickly. I know the statistics, the projections, the calculations. He pulls out a cigarette. His hands shake lighting it. Not from cold, from something else. But the men I saved? They don't know I saved them. They're alive because battles ended fast, But they'll never know the battles that didn't happen, the casualties that didn't occur. He draws deeply on the cigarette. Only the dead count, the saved are invisible. You won, sir. You ended the campaign in France months ahead of schedule. I did. Patton turns to look at his aide. His eyes are tired, older than his 58 years. And in September, when I ran out of fuel, when Eisenhower chose Monty over me, I was furious, thought they were making a terrible mistake. He pauses, stares back at the field. Maybe they were. Maybe I could have ended the war by Christmas. But you know what keeps me awake more than the men who died? Sir, the thought that maybe I'm wrong, maybe speed doesn't save lives. Maybe I'm just good at convincing myself that gambling with men's lives is justified by results. He drops the cigarette, crushes it under his boot. What if I'm just a killer who's good at math? The aide has no answer. There is no answer. Patton stands there another moment. Then the hardness returns, the doubt buried again beneath certainty, because doubt is a luxury commanders can't afford. Come on, we have a war to finish. They return to the jeep, drive on through the pocket, but the aide will remember that moment, the only time he saw Patton question himself, the only time the certainty cracked and something human showed through. Years later in his memoir he'll write, General Patton was certain about speed and aggression, certain that fast warfare saved lives, certain that his methods were justified. But in that field, in the Falaise pocket, surrounded by the cost of his certainty, I saw doubt. Just for a moment. Then it was gone, buried beneath the necessity of command. But I saw it, and I understood that his certainty wasn't ignorance. It was choice. The choice to believe in his methods, because the alternative was paralysis. September 8, 1944. Eisenhower's headquarters. Patton enters Eisenhower's office angry. He's been summoned for a meeting. He knows what it's about. Third Army has run out of fuel. The advance has stopped. Not because of German resistance, because American logistics can't keep pace with Patton's speed. Eisenhower gestures to a chair. Patton remains standing. George, we need to discuss supply allocation. Don't need to discuss anything, Ike. Need fuel. Give me 400,000 gallons. I'll be across the Rhine in 48 hours. Eisenhower shakes his head. I don't have 400,000 gallons for anyone. And Montgomery's Operation Market Garden. Monty's operation will fail. Patton interrupts. Doesn't care about protocol right now. Market Garden is too complicated. Too many things that have to go right. Airborne drops, bridge seizures, ground forces advancing on narrow roads. One thing goes wrong, the whole plan collapses. The plan has been approved. Resources are allocated. Then unallocate them. Give me the fuel. I'm already at the German border. Monty's still planning his perfect operation. Eisenhower stands, meets Patton's glare. George, you've had your chance. You advanced 400 miles in a month, destroyed 2 German armies, changed the entire campaign. But now it's someone else's turn. Someone else will waste the opportunity. Every day we wait is a day the Germans recover. Maybe, but the decision is made. Eisenhower's voice hardens. I can't give you everything you want every time you want it. That's not how coalition warfare works. Patton stares at him. The anger is visible, raw. You're making a mistake. Speed is everything. You're choosing to be slow. I'm choosing to be balanced, to keep the alliance together, to maintain political support. Eisenhower's voice softens slightly. George, I know you're right about speed. Your August proved that. But I can't run this war based on one principle. I have to balance British concerns, American interests, logistics realities, political considerations. While you balance, Germans escape, regroup. We'll be fighting them for another year. Possibly, but that's the price of coalition command. Patton turns to leave, stops at the door. History will judge this decision, Ike, when the war drags on through winter, through spring, when more men die because we stopped when we had momentum. History will remember who chose to stop. He leaves, not slamming the door, just closing it firmly enough to make his point. Eisenhower sits alone, lights a cigarette, stares at the maps on his wall showing current positions. Third Army is deep in France, approaching the German border, stopped not by the enemy, but by logistics. Patton's probably right. A concentrated push with adequate fuel might breach the German frontier before defenses are prepared, might shorten the war by months.
But Eisenhower can't make decisions based solely on military efficiency. He commands a coalition, has to balance British sensitivities, has to maintain political support, has to manage finite resources. So he chooses Market Garden over Patton's drive, chooses balanced advance over concentrated thrust, chooses coalition management over military efficiency. History will indeed judge whether he chose correctly. And Eisenhower, sitting alone with his cigarette and his maps, knows that judgment will be harsh either way. Coda. What the river taught them. Years later, when historians ask about the Mayenne crossing, they focus on the tactics, the speed, the casualties, the results. They miss the deeper truth. Patton didn't cross that river to capture territory. He crossed it because waiting meant watching the opportunity die. Every hour of preparation was an hour the Germans would use to prepare their own defenses. The math was brutal but clear. Cross fast and lose 40 men, or cross carefully and lose 500. He chose fast. Not because he was reckless, because he understood something about time that careful planners never grasp. Time is the enemy's ally. Every minute you spend perfecting your plan is a minute they spend perfecting theirs. Eisenhower understood this that morning in August, looking at the impossible map, seeing Patton's forces where they shouldn't be. He could have been furious, should have been furious. Instead, he asked a question that wasn't really a question. An acknowledgement that Patton had crossed more than a river. He'd crossed every doctrinal boundary, every planning assumption, every coordination protocol. Because asking permission would have meant getting denial. 50,000 German prisoners learned what happens when opportunity meets momentum. They tried to retreat carefully, tried to establish new lines methodically, tried to fight by doctrine. They lost to a general who understood that doctrine is written for average situations, and war at speed is never average. The final irony, Patton's August advance won the campaign in France, changed the timeline, proved that aggressive warfare could achieve in weeks what careful warfare would take months to accomplish. But it couldn't win the war. When Third Army ran out of fuel in September, when Eisenhower chose Montgomery's operation over Patton's drive, the momentum died. The war dragged on for 9 more months, through the winter, through the Battle of the Bulge, through spring 1945. Would it have ended sooner with Patton's way? We'll never know. Counterfactual history is speculation. Comfortable speculation for historians who don't have to make the decisions, who don't have to balance coalition politics against military opportunity, who don't have to choose between certain options and possible better options. But we know this. In August 1944, one general proved that sometimes the most responsible action is the one that looks insane. Sometimes protecting soldiers means risking them. Sometimes saving lives requires spending them in concentrated bursts to prevent prolonged bleeding. Patton died in December 1945. Car accident in occupied Germany. Never saw the full judgment of history. Never knew whether his methods would be celebrated or condemned. Never got to defend his choices or explain his calculations. But the Mayenne River remembers. That night in August, when 65 men died so 400 could live. When speed defeated caution. When one general bet everything on momentum and won. The question Eisenhower asked that morning, "You crossed without telling us?" wasn't really about a river crossing. It was about the moment when leaders choose between the safety of control and the gamble of chaos, between the comfort of approval and the necessity of action, between asking permission and asking forgiveness. Patton chose chaos, chose action, chose forgiveness. Eisenhower let him run, not because he approved, because he recognized that sometimes the only way to exploit opportunity is to stop trying to control it. Together, they proved that war isn't won by following rules perfectly. It's won by knowing which rules to break, when to break them, and having the courage to live with the consequences. The river still flows past Mayenne. The war is long over. The generals are dead. The soldiers are old men or memories. But the lesson remains. When opportunity appears, you don't wait for permission. You don't perfect the plan. You don't coordinate with everyone who might be affected. You cross, you move, you exploit before the moment passes. Because in war, as in life, the most dangerous thing isn't taking the risk. It's waiting until the risk becomes impossible, because the opportunity died while you were asking permission. Patton understood that. Eisenhower learned it. And 60,000 German prisoners paid the price of that understanding. That's the real story of August 1944. Not tactics, not strategy, not even victory. The story of leaders who recognize that sometimes you have to break everything you believe in to achieve what you're fighting for. And that the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between two rights that can't coexist. Between control and chaos. Between safety and speed. Between the plan and the moment. Patton chose the moment and changed the war. The river remembers.